I forgot my hairspray today. So my hair is just going crazy. And I figured my age to have some hair at all to go crazy is not so bad. It sounds. Please pray with me. Spirit of wisdom, minister, usher, people we pray. Soon a blessing to everyone here, watching at home, here today, according to our particular needs, and we'll be ever so thankful. May only truth be spoken, may only truth be heard, we ask. Amen. Just go, Jesus. You know, the older I get, the more I realize that life really is about balance. It's the balance of things that we need to live. I mean, if we're missing our vitamins or something, right, it's got showing up in negative ways. We need that balance in our lives for health and for wholeness, or what Jesus called eternal life. And there's a giving and a receiving and a taking to life. I mean, let's take breathing, right? If we don't breathe in, we can't breathe out. If we don't breathe out, we can't breathe in. And if we don't breathe, we're dead, right? So there's that balance. So let's all take a big breath in. And then out. And so we need to take in spirit. We need to bring in love. We need to be self-caring. And then also we need to give out. Some of us find it so much easier to give out and care for others than we do to care for ourselves, but we need that breathing. And there's that beautiful passage from Ecclesiastes that reminds us of that. There's a time to sow and a time to reap. And some of us are better with the sowing than the reaping. And there's a time to speak and a time to be quiet. Some of us wrestle with speaking. We find that hard. Some of us wrestle with being quiet and not speaking, right? Depending on who we are. So we got to work on the balance. And then there's a time to laugh and a time to cry. And we all prefer laughing to crying. And really, we're part of for the most part, WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, I think Roman Catholics in this culture are pretty much the same. We've been pretty trained to be stoic, We've been pretty trained to kind of push our pain down. I gotta get away from these speakers and that's a real problem. We've been taught to toughen up. I mean, when I was a little kid, and I remember, I'd be hurt or something, my mom would say to me, "Now, Paul, be a man." Right? It's a pretty powerful message to give a kid. That means, if I want to be a man, I want to be tough. I want to feel that. I want to acknowledge my pain. And we hide our pain from one another. I mean, we're very nervous about being in small groups together where we're sharing because we've had a whole lifetime of hiding our problems and hiding our pain. And yet we have a tradition that invites us, that acknowledges the need to name our pain and to share our pain. But we've been taught that we're to hide it from God, as it were. We're not to complain to God, right? And my wife told me a story that kind of, really got my attention. She said when she was a younger girl in her home church in Wallsburg, there was a Reverend Bickford. And she said once Reverend Bickford said in the sermon, "God is big enough to handle your anger. God is big enough to handle your pain. God is big enough to handle your frustrations." And Sue said, I was shocked. Isn't that something that we'd be shocked about? And she thought, I've been taught to praise God, right? To give thanks to God, to honor God, to worship God. And she said, up until that moment, it never occurred to me to be angry with God, to get my pain out with God. But it's not just the right thing to do, it's an important part of our spiritual spirituality, and it's an important part of our tradition. And so we heard read today, we've got a whole book in the Bible called Lamentations. Lamentations means to lament, to cry out, to make our complaint, to acknowledge our frustrations, to let it all out to God. Lamentations means in the Hebrew, how? How can this be? How can this happen? How? And we need to do that. Because yes, there's a time to laugh, but there's a time to cry out. There's a time to acknowledge how painful life can be. I was talking to Celia this week, in her 90s. Mine's as sharp as a tack. With health issues are just piling up. And she said to me, Paul, I'm losing my sense of why I should be alive anymore. I'm losing my will to live. I don't want to live this way for more years when nothing's working and it's just pain and one thing leads to another. And I was so glad that she felt able to share that with me. And we've all been in those places, but we need to be able to let it out. We need to acknowledge our pain and anger and frustration. And just this past week, as I was preparing this last night, I was thinking of all the things, of the people that I talked to this week, that they've got a right to be angry and frustrated and hurt. I mean, we have friends in both communities who are caring for loved ones who are on that journey to death. I mean, how painful is that? You know, you care for them, you do them, and the one who's dying, they're worrying about the one who's caring for them, right? Everybody I know who's died, and I say, well, what is it you're really concerned most about? I'm concerned about my wife or my husband or my children. We care for one another on both sides of that journey. But we need to acknowledge how hard it can be. And not just always tough. And, you know, we have folks in our community who are at risk of COVID or in vulnerable condition, and the anxiety of worrying and knowing, you know, when you got to get groceries or something, that if you get COVID, it's going to be over, and it's not going to be over in a very nice way. Think of the anxiety of that. And I hope that I encourage them to let your complaint out to God. You know, talk to the person that you feel comfortable with and share your sorrow around that, share your anxiety. And then, you know, I talked to someone this week, they're at high risk, but they have to look for work. Because they have so little money, they're going to be homeless if they don't get a job. Because you can't live on $620 a month, which is what Ontario Works pays you. And boy, they've got to complain. They've got something to cry out about. And I hope, and I know we all carry some pain and sorrow and sadness at the injustices of the world around us, the suffering of people who through no fault of their own are abused, ignored, put down, taken advantage of. And we mourn the things in our families that aren't right. I mean, so many of us have family members who are kind of like a crocodile, you know? You got to really watch out or they're going to bite you. And we kind of keep trying to pretend and hope there'll be a puppy dog, but they're not going to be. We have to learn to live with a crocodile. And you know, you can't live with a crocodile as long as you remember the crocodile. But we got to be real. I mean, in our tradition, we never think of somebody as an enemy. What does Jesus say? Love your enemies. What's the psalmist say? You lay the table before me, the brothers of my enemies. We have enemies. We have crocodiles in our lives. We're not to hate them, but we got to manage them. It's hard. It's tough. We've got things to lament. I wonder what you're lamenting. The psalmist said, in the day of trouble I seek the Lord. In night my hand is stretched out. I moan, I meditate, my spirit faints. Will the Lord spurn me forever and never again be favorable? Has God's steadfast love ceased forever? The Lamentations on Job of bitterness. My soul is bereft of peace. I have forgotten what happiness is. We come to the table of someone who knew what that was like. Jesus knew life as we knew. He wept over Jerusalem. He wept when a loved one died. Shortest verse in the New Testament, Jesus wept. And he went to the garden when he knew that the chances are he was going to be arrested and he was going to be tortured and killed. And he had it on and said, God, take this from me if you can. But God can't take everything from us because God is subject to evil. God is subject to the same things we're subject to because true love is not a controlling force. It's a vulnerable force, but it's a force that overcomes evil. And so this meal reminds us that as Jesus was honest about his pain and his struggle, he understands ours and we can be honest too. And so we come today to realize there's a time to come. There's a time to lament. And what better time than when we remember Jesus? And so as we receive the bread and the juice today, let's just within cry out and release our pain and let Jesus have it and let God have it. Because when we do that, we're not alone in our pain anymore. Because it's the aloneness that kills us the most. It's the isolation that hurts us the most. And when we can start being honest about our pain with God, with Jesus, with Spirit, and with others who will hold us in love and kindness, then we're not alone in our pain. And like Lamentations, we begin to understand that pain is not the end of the story. That God's mercies are new every morning, that wherever there is pain, God is powerfully at work in mysterious ways to help us through that, and not just through us, but to help us flourish and to eventually bring us through to another whole level of existence we call heaven. And so we give thanks that there is a time to let it out. And when we do, God receives it and draws mighty